Welcome to my humble abode, darlings. Come in out of the rain and get comfortable. I have a story to tell you, and I hope you enjoy. If you do, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Season Finale by Scare in a Box. Sarah held the arm of her father tightly as he walked her down the long aisle. He was a tall, thin man, with wrinkles around his deep-set eyes, and his hair was gray, sprinkled with strands of white. Today he was wearing a blue pinstripe suit. Her father had only ever worn a suit twice, on the day of his own wedding and the day he applied for a company job. He would often complain that suits weren't his style, but he wore one just for her. Sarah's father looked at her for the umpteenth time, his expression full of pride, and she smiled, her cheeks hurting from all the smiles she had to put up. It wasn't that Sarah didn't like smiling. It was that if her lips stretched too wide, she'd tear up. The tears were already gathering. Sarah tried to rein in her emotions, focusing her thoughts on when all this was over, when they'd both drive off to their honeymoon. The organist struck the right piano chords, and the rhythm of the wedding song matched the steady beating of her heart, which was a good sign. Sarah caught a few of her college friends standing in the middle of the second pew, a bit close to where the bridesmaids were seated, and she waved lightly at them. They waved back at her, giggling, tears shining in their eyes. They looked so happy for her. Sarah was happy, too, for having found the love of her life, Zach. From her vantage point, she could see Zach, broad back, and how his suit fit snugly on his shoulders. He was 6'1", a fine specimen of a man. Sarah wouldn't have gotten him if it weren't from the push from her friends, most especially Rhea, who had a thing for blonde guys. Sarah had thought Rhea would end up with Zach, but he seemed to have eyes only for Sarah. On reaching the altar, her father disentangled his arm and gave Sarah's hand to Zach to hold. He took a hold of it, smiling widely. His blonde hair was knotted at the back of his head, and his lips were luscious bright pink, stirring a need inside Sarah. "You look beautiful," he muttered, the blue of his eyes piercing. Sarah smiled inwardly, but didn't say anything. They both turned to face the priest, who spread his hands wide. "We are gathered together for the wedding of two amazing individuals, Zach and Sarah. They've both made a vow to each other, and on this day are getting united as one." Sarah blushed. Her cheeks flushed beet red. This was really happening. Zach lightly pinched her thumb, but didn't turn. The priest continued, "It's a blessed moment for all, and at this point in time I'd like to call on whoever doesn't want this union to speak now or forever hold their peace." Sarah bit down on her lips, her gaze straight. This was the part she dreaded. She just hoped they'd get through it without any trouble. Zach squeezed her fingers, as if reassuring her that it would be okay. Sarah let out a deep breath. "No one?" the priest finally said after a beat of silence, looking around at the whole congregation. Suddenly Sarah heard a rustle from nearby, and her head turned in the direction of the noise just as Rhea stood. Sarah gasped, tiny shivers running down her spine. What could Rhea possibly have to say? "Yes?" the priest prompted, and Sarah's gaze slowly traveled down Rhea's lacy red dress. But there was nothing out of the ordinary. She gulped, hoping that this would be a false alarm. Her other friends were staring up at Rhea, and only a few whispered among themselves. Out of the corner of Sarah's eyes, she could see her father was close to tears, his hands reaching out to clasp her mother's. Rhea inhaled a shaky breath, contorted her face like someone who was about to cry. "On the 27th, a week ago, Zach came into my home and sexually assaulted me, and when I threatened him with the police, he took off. I just found out a few days ago that I'm with his child." Sarah stifled a loud gasp, her head reeling from what she had just heard. It seemed unimaginable, the accusations, but Rhea couldn't say that without having some kind of proof. And her friend's wedding? Sarah's mouth opened and closed in shock. A strangled sound, one she didn't recognize, came from the back of her throat. Her eyes instantly filled with tears. The whole world seemed to come to a standstill, and Sarah shrugged off Zach's feeble attempts at peacemaking. A hush settled over the crowd as if a sudden cold was covering the entire area. Sarah felt a slow chill travel through her, making her involuntarily shudder. When she looked up, there was a message for her, written in red cursive letters which dripped like a blood trail, and it hung in the air. The message was clear: "End of season." Sarah sniffled back tears, head slowly turning to stare around her environment, taking in details of what she'd missed. The scene had changed to a movie set facade at the center of rolling hills and mountains, and the guests had all turned into standees, like solidified blocks of ice. Sarah's legs shook, and sweat coated her forehead, dripping down the sides of her face and ruining her makeup. She began piling the standees to a corner, trying to rid herself of anger and hurt she felt. Minutes later, she was still the same, and the anger was no longer just anger. It was a blinding, white-hot rage. Sarah carried the groom's standee and smashed it on the floor, hitting it over and over as much time as the pain stabbed at her chest. Just then, a floating menu appeared in front of her with two options: confirm next season or cancel series. Sarah blew the hair away from her sweaty face, a crease settling between her brows. What exactly was she supposed to do now? She reached out a finger, hesitating before making up her mind and pressing the cancel series. So quoth this raven. Another absolutely wonderful story from Scare in a Box. They have been so good to continue to share stories with me despite my time off this last summer. So I can always rely on them, and I really do appreciate that. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful week ahead, my darlings. Bye-bye. My darlings, it means so much to me that you come and listen to my little stories. I so appreciate it, but if you did like it, please feel free to hit the like button and subscribe so you can come back and hear more. My dearest thanks to my supporters, past and present. It means so much to me. Have a lovely day, my darlings.